For any of you who are missing the miniatures in the 3rd edition 40k box set, it seems that Games Workshop are going to be selling a new batch of them well over 20 years later. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today we're talking about a rather interesting Games Workshop release. As part of their Made to Order series, they're going to be allowing people to get their hands on miniatures from the 3rd edition 40k box set, the one that featured Black Templars versus Drukhari. It's kind of an interesting move, this one, really playing into the nostalgia vibe. I know they've done this Made to Order thing a fair few times with things like old metal models that they don't sell anymore, but I think this is the first time I've seen them do it with a really big plastic kit. Kind of a fun move, and it really hits the nostalgia vibe hard for me. Before we start, I would say that it is just the models that they're reselling. They're not doing the entire box set again, so sadly you won't be able to pick up the ancient 3rd edition rulebook, those data cards, or any of the terrain or things. It is just literally the miniatures that you play with, the 20 Dark Eldar models before they even became Drukhari, and 11 Space Marine miniatures. Certainly for me though, this set really does bring back fond memories. This was the box that got me into Warhammer 40k, back when I was a fairly young child, and definitely was showing my inexperience with putting miniatures together and looking after them in any way, shape or form. The Landspeeder was glued straight onto its flying base optimistically and then snapped off very shortly after. The Space Marines were caked in a very thick layer of blue paint with squiggly yellow shoulder pads. Yes, I first started out with Ultramarines, and the poor Drukhari didn't really have a chance of being stored properly, so near enough every single one of those fragile spiky bits got broken straight off. Still though, I like to think I've learned from at least a few of those mistakes, and I think I might even have the Landspeeder kicking around somewhere. I believe it got stripped, repainted, and armed with an underslung heavy flamer to act as a Landspeeder tornado at some stage. I believe it's painted green now and sitting as a box underneath the rest of the model storage. Apparently this thing came out in 1998, I think I got it a few years later, but it's pretty interesting to see Games Workshop revisit things quite so far from the distant past, and look at what things have changed and stayed the same within their models. Quite apart from the miniatures though, the rest of this box set really was quite good value. The 3rd edition rulebook I believe was the last one where they had the rules for every single faction within the game. I guess the scope of 40k was a little bit smaller back then, and they crammed in the datasheets and some simple rules into its pages. It was quite cool having a read through and working out how all the other factions' armies worked a bit. It's definitely a far cry from the rules bloat and the multiple rulebooks that you need for every single game of 40k now. The terrain was quite good fun as well. I've seen those ruins used in all sorts of terrain conversions over the years. Coming from the starter set, it just meant that people had quite a lot of those around, and with a little bit of paint I think they hold up perfectly against any of Games Workshop's more modern terrain creations. I guess it's hard to go too far wrong with some mini corners of bombed out buildings. There's also a few tank traps in there as well, and some jungle trees, multi-part modular ones which I believe that you could make them into different shapes if you wanted to. I like the way that they actually used some coloured plastic for those ones, so the trunks were brown and the plasticky leaves were green. As well as that, the set came with the Blast and Flamer templates and the Scatter Dice, all relics of a bygone age here in 9th edition now. For those who never experienced the previous editions of 40k before 8th, you'd put one of these templates that you can see on the right down on the unit that you were shooting, roll the Scatter Dice to see if you get an arrow or a hit marker, and then move it a random number of inches depending on which way the arrow pointed. It did create some pretty fun scenarios where you could actually have blast markers scattering back over your own units if they were a bit inaccurate, and also some fun rules debates when you and your opponent could see the dice from slightly different angles, and came up with some wildly different interpretations as to where the blast marker should land. It's hard not to miss those a bit, even if I can see why they might have done away with them in 8th and 9th editions. In terms of actual miniatures within the set, you got these 10 Space Marines on the left here, 1 Landspeeder, and then 20 Drukhari. This was long before they became Drukhari of course, so they were actually Dark Eldar back then. In the article, when they said they're remaking them, they said that the Space Marines were just armed with bolters. I do remember my set having a flamer and missile launcher options there. I don't know if that was a later edition of the same kit or something, or whether or not you do just get the old style Tactical Marine set here. To be honest, I don't really think that the Space Marines are really all that different from today's Tactical Marines. I know they have had their kit redone at some point in recent history, I believe somewhere around 2015-ish perhaps. Now they've got a lot more weapon choices and options for the sergeant and things. Back then I believe it was usually the sergeant having a bolt pistol and chainsword, one marine having a flamer, and one having a missile launcher. I do kind of like the way that they're giving these guys the old style bases though. These are the 25mm bases for them. That was the standard for basically any infantry models, even rather big ones. In the more modern era, Games Workshop doesn't really like miniatures overhanging their bases. The Landspeeder as well, I really don't think would look out of place at all at the moment. It is basically the same kit as you can buy at the moment, but I believe today's one again has more weapon options in it. You have the parts to make it into a Typhoon or Tornado pattern Landspeeder. This one really is just the basic one, with the multi-melter or the heavy bolter on it. I'd say perhaps the Drukhari are the most interesting relic from the kit though. These aren't just minor design tweaks from their original version, they're a completely different kit. A lot more thin-bladed spikes than the current Drukhari kit, and they come with quite a lot of those dual-bladed claw things that you can see this guy holding in his left hand, and just really quite a different and noticeable aesthetic compared with current Drukhari kits. As I said, I can certainly confirm that if you don't treat them very nicely, all those slender bits will fall off very, very easily indeed. Again, I think that the options are quite limited compared with the current Cavalite Warrior kit. I think you get a fair few splinter cannons within the box set, but other than that I don't think there's any sort of special weapons like blasters or other things for the main warrior squad. Options and extras and customization really have come on quite a bit in Games Workshop's more recent years. I must admit, for nostalgia purposes, I do think there's maybe more nostalgia in the entire box set as a whole, rather than in just these miniatures. It is kind of fun that the Dark Eldar are a whole different aesthetic, but just buying this set in itself does make me think that all the Space Marines that you're getting are just slightly downgraded versions of what you can get from Games Workshop at the moment. They don't really look all that different, and don't have that big of a different feel to them, aside from just having some smaller bases. That aside though, it is pretty interesting that they're redoing an entire starter set in this kind of way. Previously I think those made-to-order things have largely been older resin or metal kits. I believe they did one for the Vostroyan Firstborn after they went out of production. It's interesting to see old plastics come back alongside the metal things. It makes it kind of interesting for whether they'd do this for other previous starter sets. Assault on Black Reach I think would be really fun and popular. I guess there's potential for things like the Battle for Macragge and Dark Vengeance as well. Both of those will be really cool to see return, particularly for anyone who got them at the time and want to relive their first steps into 40k. In any case, this made-to-order set will be coming from the 25th of December to the 3rd of January, so you can get the old Drukhari for a limited time only. Currently there's no idea of what they're going to charge for this yet. It'd be kind of interesting to see what sort of value they place on these old kits. I'm going to guess they're not going to charge them at any less than the new ones for the effort of going back and starting to manufacture things that they don't anymore. I guess you can check on their website within the next few days if you want to have a look at the prices. In any case, I think we'll leave that there for this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Would you be in any way tempted to get your hands on some old style Drukhari? And would you be more interested in any of these other starter sets if they did decide to do another run of them? If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly try and keep up with Games Workshop's news and releases, alongside all the tactics and strategy content on the channel. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos here, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, including seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.